Hey, welcome to Home Video Hangouts. With the release of Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, I thought it was the perfect time to do a ranking video of the entire Ghostbusters franchise. So with each movie, I'm going to give you what I think was great about the movie, what I think could have been improved, and where it fits in my ranking of the entire series. Alright, to start out, we have from 2016, Ghostbusters Answer the Call. And man, this one was not received well. Many fans of the Ghostbusters franchise didn't see this as a good reboot or really a movie that was necessary at all. And I could see why a lot of people weren't happy with it. With this one, I think the cast and the acting could have been a little bit better and the comedy could have been a little bit better. But with that being said, I think there are still a few things to appreciate with this movie. I personally think that the release of this movie was better than not getting any release in the franchise around this time. So first of all, I would say that this movie came out pretty far after the original two Ghostbusters movies, and I think fans are really wanting a reboot or another film in the franchise. And while this movie didn't execute on that really well, it did still have some nice visual effects and special effects, and I thought it was really fun to see some modern special effects put into a Ghostbusters movie. And with that, I know that a lot of the cast that was put in this movie is talented. They've done well in other films and had great comedy in other films. I think the source material here, though, wasn't the greatest, and there are just so many things that could have been improved with this film to make it better. So while I don't think it's the greatest in the series, I do think it's still worth a watch at least once, and I think it still fits in with the franchise as a whole, even if it's not well received, as just a modern interpretation of Ghostbusters that starts to incorporate some modern special effects and kind of leads right into the reboot of Ghostbusters Afterlife, and I think that film was maybe appreciated even more because of this one coming out before it. Alright, next we have in the number 4 spot, Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. I actually did a full review of this movie, which you can see linked above me here. This one just came out in the theaters, and it kind of combines the original cast from the first two Ghostbusters movies with the cast from Ghostbusters Afterlife. And that was one of the things that really stood out to me in this movie, is how they incorporated so many great members of the casts of the prior movies. And in addition to that, this movie had really phenomenal special effects, and I really like the visuals they used for the ghosts in this movie. And that was what was really impressive here. What could have been improved with this movie, though, is the comedy for one, and the plot as well. So the comedy, in my opinion, fell pretty flat in this movie. There weren't any jokes that really stood out that I thought were especially funny or had me or really anyone in the theater laughing out loud. And in addition to that, the plot was pretty predictable and just kind of reused a lot of things from prior Ghostbusters movies. It seems like this is just another Ghostbusters movie that takes place in New York. There's a major ghost taking over that they have to fight, and they have to team up with other cast members to fight the ghost, and it's a very predictable story that doesn't really incorporate too much new aside from some new cast members. And that was one of the other things, is this almost feels like an overcrowded Ghostbusters movie. It's almost like they're trying to make the Avengers of Ghostbusters movies here, where they're bringing cast from almost all the Ghostbusters movies except for the 2016 one and trying to turn this into something bigger. But what I think they really needed to do here, and what they should do going forward if the series will continue, is to create a whole new plot element, whether that is more of an adventure that the Ghostbusters go on outside of New York, or maybe they incorporate more actual horror elements. I think there's other directions they can go with this series to kind of breathe new life into it. But for what this is, it is a great combination of the older movies and the newer movies, and I think fans of the franchise will appreciate this one still. Alright, and then in the number 3 spot, we have Ghostbusters 2. So to start out, I want to say this is a very important sequel. When it comes to Ghostbusters, the original was such a huge success and a classic movie that was so well appreciated that it puts the sequel in a difficult situation. The first movie was a movie that very much deserves a sequel because of its success, but this has happened many times in the past where you have a major franchise that had a very successful original movie, like say Star Wars, for example, or Ghostbusters, or countless others that came out, especially around the 70s and 80s. And it's hard for sequels to really live up to their original film. And so with that, this second movie did still have some great special effects, did still have some good comedy, some good acting. It just didn't quite, in my opinion, have the same charm that the original film had. And it's just so hard for a sequel to live up to the original. So with that being said, this was still a well-received film. I have it in the number 3 spot because it is a good movie, and I'm really glad they did do a sequel to the original Ghostbusters instead of having it be a standalone film. And this, really did keep the series going, and I'm sure there's so many people in the 80s that were wanting a sequel and were so happy when this came out. So I think this one still has a lot of great elements to it, just isn't quite on the same level as the original. Then in the number 2 spot, I have Ghostbusters Afterlife. This film came out as a reboot after the 2016 Ghostbusters movie was received so poorly, and I think the decision to bring in some younger actors and actresses that are well known from other series, as well as Paul Rudd, helped this series to stand alone as a newer, better reboot. And the fact that this movie was set outside of New York was helpful as well, because it almost gave this movie a feel of like an origin story, like from the Marvel movies, where you're kind of learning about some new characters that are being introduced in their home environment, and it really developed more depth to those characters compared to if they were just thrown into the setting in New York, with the primary roles being taken by the older actors from this series. My main reason for putting this in the number 2 spot was because I feel that this movie saved the franchise when it really needed it. It could have just died after the 2016 Ghostbusters movie and the controversy around that, but instead they decided to go back to the drawing board, make this movie, reintroduce some new actors, and I think that really kept the series going, and that's why we have another Ghostbusters movie that just came out that is at least somewhat well received. And so in this one, I think what they could have improved on is using a little bit more action and visual effects in this one to kind of bring them to that same level as some of the others in this series. But I do appreciate the kind of character building and world building they did in this one, and this is a very important movie for the franchise that I think longtime watchers will really enjoy. Then of course, in the number 1 spot, I have the original Ghostbusters movie. This movie is the reason that the franchise is still alive today. It's one of those movies that came out in the 80s when, even though we didn't have the most advanced special effects like we have today or the most advanced technology, it had a level of creativity and escapism in it, mixed with great comedy and great acting that we rarely see in modern cinema. Movies like this are really hard to find nowadays with new releases, and it's hard for me to even find too much that could have been improved with this movie. It is, of course, slower paced than more modern movies, but the sheer charm and great acting and everything in this movie really made it stand out anyway, to where it's still an enjoyable film to watch today. And I'm sure this is going to be a favorite movie in the franchise for older viewers and new viewers alike for years to come. So that's my ranking of the entire Ghostbusters series. I have really enjoyed watching all of these movies over the years, and I am able to find something to appreciate in all of these films. So I look forward to seeing what could happen next in the series and the franchise with all these new characters that have been introduced and everything. And I'd love to hear in the comments below what your ranking is of the Ghostbusters movies and what you'd like to see next from this franchise. And make sure you hit the like button and the comment button down below, as well as the subscribe button to see my upcoming videos, and I will see you in the next one.